following is a special presentation on the Open Public Events Network.
Good evening, I'm Layla Tevet. Welcome to a special on the Open Public Events Network. Tonight's program is made possible by the North Carolina Hazardous Waste Management Commission with support from the Chemical Industry Council of North Carolina, the North Carolina Association of Launderers and Cleaners Incorporated, the North Carolina Citizens for Business and Industry, and the North Carolina Textile Manufacturers Association Incorporated. We are here tonight to bring you an update on the siting activities of the Hazardous Waste Management Commission and to hear comments from a variety of people involved in that process. Among the most important people that we would like to hear from is you, however. We'll begin taking your calls and getting your input a little later in the program. Tonight's panelists include representatives of North Carolina's Hazardous Waste Management Commission. I'll introduce them in just a moment, but first, let me begin by introducing the Commission's recent activities. During the past 6 months, the Commission has developed site selection criteria to help locate sites suitable for a hazardous waste management facility in North Carolina. Last week, the Commission released a map showing the effect of all these criteria. The white areas show the locations of the state which are still under consideration for locating the facility. As you can see, according to the criteria, the Piedmont part of North Carolina remains as the most suitable area for siting the facility. Tonight, we will have a chance to discuss the Commission's siting process and to inform you about the designs and plans for the hazardous waste management facility, which will most likely be located somewhere in the Piedmont of North Carolina. Let me introduce some of the Hazardous Waste Management Commission members and staff who will join us this evening. First, Professor Al Turner, Chairman of the Hazardous Waste Management Commission. He's a professor of environmental science at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Professor Trenton Davis, a member of the Hazardous Waste Management Commission, is a professor of environmental health at East Carolina University. And Darrell Hinnant. Mr. Hinnant is executive director of the Hazardous Waste Management Commission. And thank you all for being with us this evening. During the next 2 hours, we will be showing you several videotapes with state officials and other hazardous waste experts discussing the proposed hazardous waste management facility. The Commission members I've just introduced, Professor Turner, Professor Davis, and Mr. Hinnant, will be here throughout the program to answer your questions and to talk directly with you. First, let me ask our panel a bit about hazardous waste, if you don't mind. Professor Turner, would you give us a little background? What is hazardous waste, and why is it so important that North Carolina have a facility to treat and dispose of it?
Hazardous waste is basically waste which, if it's not treated properly, can be corrosive, can be ignitable or flammable, it can be reactive, or it can be toxic. It comes from all sorts of manufacturing industries, and we have the same kinds of waste in our house, things such as oven cleaner, strong disinfectants, paint solvents, paint thinners. These are in our home, and they're the kinds of waste that make up hazardous waste. Our industries who generate these wastes must treat them according to very strict state and federal regulations and to obey all the environmental laws of the state. The problem has been that North Carolina hasn't had any facilities to treat these wastes, and that we've been sending our waste to other states for treatment. These states have gotten tired of treating North Carolina's waste, and since we have not been doing very much on our own. So you can see the problem of hazardous waste is everybody's problem. And that's why the legislature, the General Assembly last summer, suggested that formed the Treatment Commission and suggested that we design and construct a facility to treat these wastes in North Carolina.
All right, thank you, Professor. Darrell, would you briefly explain North Carolina's role in the regional agreement for treating hazardous wastes?
The General Assembly said back at the last session when they formed the Hazardous Waste Management Commission that they thought the most expeditious way to manage hazardous waste was for several states to go together and to form a regional arrangement so that every state would not have to have duplicative facilities, so that one state would manage this type of waste, another would manage the other, and we would then share access to each other's facilities so we could have the best, the safest management practice so that we would not have to have very large facilities in every state.
All right, what kind of facility are we talking about?
North Carolina's facility is basically going to be 3 components. The governor negotiated with other states, and within that arrangement, it was decided that there were large landfills in other locations, large aqueous treatment facilities in other locations, but North Carolina's facility will be three components. One, an incinerator, two, a solvent recovery process, and three, a residuals management facility to take the ash from from the incinerator and store it there on site.
Okay, thanks. I hope we can talk about all three of those a little bit
Sure.
later in detail. Let's talk now about the siting work the Hazardous Waste Management Commission has done. The criteria have shown that the most suitable areas for the state for locating a facility are in the Piedmont. Professor Davis, as a professor of environmental health and a member of the Hazardous Waste Management Commission, would you explain how the Commission has developed these criteria and what makes the Piedmont area most suitable for a hazardous waste management facility?
The Piedmont area of North Carolina is the most suitable area for this facility because portions of the area, the Piedmont, meet the technical criteria which the Commission has established over a period of several months. The Commission is looking for a technically sound site for this facility. We want to be sure first that it is constructed safely. We want to make sure it's built on stable land, so we've reviewed the state's geology. We want to build it where it will not be flooded, so we've had to consider floodplains and flood zones of the state. We want to be especially careful about the rivers and streams and precocians, and so we reviewed criteria related to those areas. We want to make sure that we protect our drinking water, whether it be surface or groundwater. The Commission looked at all of these things and much more, which will be discussed this evening, as we developed criteria to find a suitable facility for the location for this facility. Three sets of criteria were developed. Following the development of each set of criteria, a state map was developed in which we indicated areas that had been excluded. The first map excluded areas along the coast, hurricane surge areas, the PCB landfill in Warren County, some areas in the western part of the state which would have been eliminated because of slope and so forth. The second set of criteria further screened portions of the state, and we finally have developed, after all three sets of criteria have been developed, a final map which shows the areas of the state which are unsuitable for construction of this facility.
Okay, with these criteria, what areas did you consider? What counties are still included?
There are 26 counties. I think that probably Al will be referring to the specific counties,
Okay.
or at least portions of 26 counties.
And as I understand it, you held public hearings. Where all did you hold
The
those?
public hearings were held in 12 communities or cities in North Carolina, from Rocky Mount in the east to Morganton in the west. They were attended, in some cases, very well. I think in one case we had 500 in attendance. Others were not as well attended. In each case, though, the Commission did hear comments from citizens. Many of the criteria, which are now in the final rules, obviously, were generated as a result of input from citizens. And I want to emphasize that I can specifically, as other members of the Commission can point to specific criteria which were developed after public hearings. So it is an important part, and was an important part of this process.
All right, thank you so much. Professor Turner, now that the Commission knows it's going to be looking at a site in the Piedmont, are there specific areas or counties in the Piedmont which seem most suitable?
There are still land areas in the state in 27 counties that would be suitable at this time, looking at the criteria that we have already applied. Our viewers can see on their screen this map of the state, and all of the blue areas of the state, which is most of the state, indicate those areas which have been excluded by guidelines and criteria that were adopted by the Commission.
Those are out.
Those are completely out. We will not be looking for a site in the blue-colored areas on the state map. The white areas are areas that we consider to be the most highly preferred areas. Our viewers will be able to see the red ring around these white areas in the central part of the state, and these are the most preferred areas for choosing a site. We can also see that there's some green areas. And these are areas that also, at this time, appear to be suitable, but are less preferred than the land areas that are shaded white on the map. There are several other things on the map that I would like to point out to you. If you will look at the large circle, the dark circle that is now being pointed at. This is the 75, what we call the 75-mile centroid of the state. This is 75 miles from the center of the state where all the hazardous waste generated are shipped off-site. Then there are 3 smaller circles that are not bounded by the large circle but traverse the circle. These small circles indicate 45-mile distance from a meteorological station. The reason that we consider this important is that we will have to prepare air dispersion models for air quality permits, and we need to have data on air quality and various meteorological conditions to do this. Finally, the lines that look like a little amoeba that spread around on the map, these indicate distances of 15 miles from the interstate highways. So what they do, they bound the interstate highway with a 15-mile distance. And basically, this is what the current maps looks like. We will be first looking for sites in the white areas.
Right, those 15-mile boundaries, are those in or out?
The 15-mile boundaries, those outside of the amoeba-shaped lines
Right.
are out.
I see.
Those that are inside are in.
Okay, I wasn't sure. Do you have specific sites in those counties that you're giving consideration to?
We do not. We are looking for 2 sites, 2 acceptable sites, which we will announce on May the 1st.
Okay, Mr. Hennett, what happens after the site is announced on May the 1st?
Well, we have several activities that we're involved in. We're supposed to be working with the communities to come in and to gather information. We are asking each of those communities to establish site designation review committees where they can help us know more about that site in their community. There are funds available that would assist them in reviewing this data, and hopefully we can create a dialogue between the Commission and its contractor that it has selected that would operate and build this facility and the local host community.
You said a dialogue and not a debate, I understand.
That's right, a dialogue.
Okay. Mr. Hennett, recently you talked with Gretchen Peed, a county commissioner from Catawba County, about the questions that local citizens may have about the facility. Let's look at that discussion on a videotape.
Gretchen, the Commission feels very strongly about public participation and public involvement in the siting process for the hazardous waste management facility. We've invited citizens from all over the state to meet with us, to make comments, and to review the procedures that we're going about in the siting process. You as a county commissioner, what do you think county leaders want to know about the siting process?
Well, to tell you the truth, what they really want to know is it's not going to be in my county. But truthfully, they need to know how they can help their citizens to find the facts. They need to know the facts themselves, but they also need to know where they can get these facts, because the citizens are going to want to find these answers themselves so that they feel that they're real.
Okay. And what kind of information do you think the citizens are looking for so that we could provide that information to the county leaders?
Something about the technology. One of the most important things, I think, is why do we have hazardous waste? I think that when we're working with it, we're so aware of what it is that we don't realize that there are people out there saying that we don't need to have any at all. We could have 0 hazardous waste.
Mm-hmm.
And yet all of us, we know what it is to childproof our houses. And that's because we have hazardous things in our homes.
Okay. So make the information available as to why there are hazardous waste, how much there is, and where it comes from, so they can understand that they are a part of this whole hazardous waste network.
And also that this isn't the total solution, that this is only aimed at handling a certain amount, that we are still going to be depending on other means for some of our hazardous waste.
Questions that we hear most often from the citizens are, is this thing going to be safe? Do you think the citizens believe we can build a facility that's going to be safe?
Well, I think there's always a question of that, but I think that most of the citizens do. The technology is there. I think that most people believe that the technology is there. We can't guarantee absolutely perfect everything, but the risks have to be balanced against what is the risk if we don't do anything at all.
Right. We sometimes hear that we can't rely on government to protect us, that the local community thinks that only the local community is willing to protect itself in the process. We have said from the beginning that we were going to build a facility that was the highest technology available, best demonstrated available technology, and that we were going to do everything possible to monitor, surveil, and to watch the facility in any manner that we could. We've even suggested that the local community might want to have, paid by funds from the facility, its own local watchdog agency. Do you believe that those kind of things will help allay some of the fears from the local citizens?
I think very much so, because what they're looking at in other places are ones that the monitoring hasn't been kept up. And this will mean that they are responsible for working together with the monitor to see that monitoring takes place. And it, well monitored, we'll know what's happening.
Right. We agree with you. We are trying very hard to get this message out. We certainly appreciate your help in helping make it available to the citizens tonight. Thank you very much.
Interesting discussion, Darrell. Reducing hazardous waste and cutting down the amount of waste which is being generated in our state has been a widely discussed topic lately, especially among environmental leaders. Darrell, could you explain the slide that we're about to put up on our screen having to do with hazardous waste reduction? There's the graphic. Perhaps you'll tell us what that means.
Yes. Back in about 6 months ago, when we were participating in the negotiation for the regional agreement, the other states said, how much waste are you producing in North Carolina, and what do you project you will be producing in the future? One of the things that we did is we got together with the state's budget office that routinely projects for the state income as well as tax revenues, and asked them if they could help us by projecting what industry growth there would be in each industry segment. And as a result of that growth, we then projected from the top line that you see on this graphic the growth of waste that we envision for those years, 20 years in the future. We then said, well, since we have a very aggressive waste minimization and waste reduction program in North Carolina, how is that program going to affect this growth figure that we're looking at? So we asked the state's Pollution Prevention Pays program executives to help us to estimate the amount of waste that we would have in each of these industry segments, and to what the possibility within those segments would be to reduce that waste characteristic. And in that process, we came up with the bottom line that was on the graphic that you saw a few moments ago. So we estimate, based on the projections that we have, if we had not had a waste minimization program, there would be as much as 40% more waste in North Carolina in the year 2009.
So you're figuring you can cut it by 40% if my math holds right.
That's exactly right.
Okay. Professor Turner, you talked about waste reduction with Jerry Cole of the North Carolina Sierra Club and Gary Hunt of the state's Pollution Prevention Program. We're going to take a look and a listen to that.